Hi there! Welcome to Pallet University and a really weird video, not just weird for the channel, but just a really odd video about something that was pointed out to me by a friend. It's it still fits within the themes of the channel. It is Pokemon and science, but in a way that we have not talked about them together before, in that this talks about Pokemon in the sense that it was published in a real scientific journal as a real scientific article. You're going to want to see this. So before I actually get into sort of the Pokemon side of this video, I need to talk about some of the science side of this video. So what you probably might be familiar with is that when scientists do their research, they publish it in a scientific journal. Journals, that are super well known are journals like literally just named Science or Nature. Those are probably the two most well known scientific journals, but there are thousands and thousands of other ones. For example, as a paleontologist, the ones that I would be most likely to publish in, when I finish my master's thesis, I will be adapting that into, instead of being like a 30 to anywhere between 30 to 60 pages, down to probably 10 to 15 to be published in a journal. And I'll be most likely to submit it to, the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. There's like paleoecology, the journal of paleomammalogy. There's lots and lots of different, very selective journals that focus on like one particular topic. And then there are ones that get broader as you go up, such as Science and Nature, which publish on anything from paleontology like I do to organic chemistry, just things that are really groundbreaking in science. However, because there are so many of them, some are better than others, specifically when it comes to sort of vetting and looking through the papers that are submitted and figuring out whether they do good science, whether the methodology done by the researchers in the science, the methodology done by these researchers to get these results was sound, whether their methodology makes sense, whether it's based on previous practices, or whether it's just complete nonsense and things that people are just sort of making up. There's actually a really interesting free-to-watch documentary that isn't specifically about this, but goes into it a little bit, called Paywall the Movie, and that'll be the third link in the description. It's literally just paywallthemovie.com, and you can watch it for free. But what this sort of gets into is that journals make crazy amounts of money. So when a scientist submits their paper, so for example, when I submit my master's thesis to whatever journal I will submit it to, I don't get a dime from that. In fact, I have to pay to even submit it to that journal, and they may or may not even decide to publish it. They could tell me no, and I don't get my money back. So the side tangent, the concept of scientists getting paid to publish things about like climate change, things like that, that's just complete nonsense. So anytime someone says that a scientist publishes something to get rich, they just do not know how science works these days and do not know anything about the scientific process. Anyway, side tangent aside. So to have access to these various journals, places, mostly schools, colleges, universities, pay the journal to have access to all of their papers, because it's similar to like a magazine subscription in that you don't get to read it if you don't pay for the magazine. There's no library or bookstore that you can just go check out, the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. That doesn't exist. So in order to have access to the current up-to-date research published by these journals, schools need to pay a lot of money. So sometimes these journals that are not very good at vetting their papers to make sure that no nonsense gets through still get a lot of money, because they can be included in like a package with a handful of other journals that they then split the money from this university. Long story short, bad journals, despite being bad, can still make a decent chunk of money, but it's kind of hard to prove definitively that a journal is bad and doesn't follow good practices. So, one hero, or potentially many heroes because I don't actually know, submitted a paper to a journal called American Journal of Biomedical Science and Research, which, on its face, sounds pretty legit, But, as we'll see, they are very bad. So the first link that will be in the description will be a link to this actual paper that was published in this actual journal. And then the second link will be an opinion article about it, where you can read more about it. But in case you don't want to click on that link and check it out, we're going to look through it together. So for copyright reasons, I'm not going to go through the entire paper, just because journals, when you submit a paper to a journal, that then they become the copyright owners of that, piece of literature. So I don't think that they would be overly fond, especially considering that how sketchy this journal is, overly fond of me showing their work. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of it, and you can decide for yourself. So I have the paper. You can download it right from that first link that I showed below. And as you can see here, Silage City COVID-19 outbreak linked to Zubat consumption is the title of this paper. Now, you might see that. And if you're watching this channel, ideally you know about Pokemon. So you might know Silage City is a city in X and Y in the region of Kalos. And that Zubat, obviously, is a Pokemon. This was, like I said, this is a very real thing that was published in this actual journal. So yeah, it's been a day, and this was really not the video that I meant on making today, but I couldn't not see this and talk about it. So we have some of the authors. This is very, very custom to have the title, and then have the authors below and the institutions where they are working out of. So the first one is Utsugi Elm from the Department of Biology, New Barktown University, Wakaba Town, Japan. That's Professor Elm. Nasu Joy from the Department of Veterinary Virology, Nurse Joy. Silage City Pokemon Center, or Poke Center, Silage City, France, or Kalos. Gregory House, which is not Pokemon related, but is the doctor, the main character of the show House, that was very popular back in the early 20-teens. A fake physician, basically, played by the wonderful Hugh Laurie. And then Matan Shlomi? I don't know what this is a reference to. Given that it's Gotham General Hospital, I would assume it might be from Gotham, but I honestly don't know, and I didn't look it up. So if you know, let me know down below. So yeah, and it even has the full citation. This is a legit paper. And so we'll just talk a little bit about the abstract, which is sort of the condensed version of a paper, summarized for people who in order to decide if you want to read the whole thing, you read the abstract, because it gives you the problem, how they addressed it, what the results were, and then you can look more into it by reading the rest of the paper. So the abstract says, a localized outbreak of COVID-19 pneumonia in Silage City among a population with no history of travel to infected regions has been tentatively linked to consumption of the regional insectivorous bat, or insectivorous Zubat, which they give the scientific name because it's very common to, if you reference an animal, you then give it scientific name afterward. And they give Zubat the scientific name Vespertilio ceruleus cineocollis. And it's also very common practice to, after you give the scientific name, genus, species, to then give the larger group that it is a part of, for which they give Zubat the group Pseudochiroptera, which the group of bats, the name for bats as a group is Chiroptera, and pseudo means fake, so fake bats. Supported by amino acid sequence similarity between SARS-CoV-2, the scientific name for coronavirus, and a related coronavirus from the bats. An increased need for surveillance of bat viruses in Kalos is warranted. So again, they straight up mention Zubat. They used two made up scientific names and reference a place that does not actually exist in the first 3 lines of this paper. So this paper was published back in early March. So that's just sort of a reference for how outdated some of this COVID information might be. But it goes into just talk about a little bit about what coronavirus is, because, like I said, this was at the quite beginning of the pandemic. It talks about what it is. They don't actually mention anything about Pokemon. So the first couple paragraphs of this are good scientific information. Although, I actually just kind of noticed this myself. They threw centrets in here, pikas, which is an actual animal. That is, they're related to rabbits, but not quite rabbits. Centrets and kappas, which kappas are a fictional, like mythological animal, whereas pikas are real, but sort of, I guess, probably a reference to Pikachu. And then centrets obviously are also a Pokemon. So I don't think that there is anything else referencing Pokemon in here until about here. So we're 3 paragraphs deep now. Because most outbreaks of COVID-19 outside China have been traced to travelers from Wuhan, where the virus originated from, or those who came in contact with them. And community spreading of this virus has been confirmed. To this literature, we add a report from Silage City in the Kalos region, France. Again, a region that does not exist. I speak French, so I know that there is not an actual region of France called Kalos. Where an outbreak of the densely populated metropolis has to date produced 420 confirmed infections with 7 deaths, all in elderly and with those with pre-existing conditions. Reported 2% fatality estimate for COVID-19. So then, that's, again, if you're not familiar with French geography, you might not know that. So, fair. But then we get to, right here, continuing the same paragraph. Let's see, the outbreak is remarkable as no residents are known to have traveled to infected areas in recent months. However, an unknown number of international visitors have passed through the city via the connecting cave, an actual location in the Pokemon games, east of the city, linking to Route 7 and 8 of the Kalos County Highway Network. Epidemiologists believe that it is highly likely that a journal publishing this paper does not practice peer review and therefore must be predatory. They straight up say, this journal is nonsense and is predatory, actively taking people's money while not giving them what they pay for. And it still made it through here. It still made it through their rigorous process. So once again, after this, they don't really drop too many hints that this is fake, that this is not a real study that happened. Although they do go into a little fun biology about Zubat, so while we're here, we might as well take a look at it. So it says, Connecting Cave is a known roosting area for the widely spread Zubat, and then gives that scientific name again. A troglomorphic anophthalmic bat subspecies, whose numbers in the cave were estimated to number between 600 and 800,000. Which I think is fun because obviously Zubat are everywhere in caves in Pokemon games. And so they also give a couple biological terms here that are real biological terms, where it says troglomorphic, which means basically cave or darkness adapted. Typically it's things that sort of lose their color, because like in caves you don't need to spend your biological energy making pigment. Nothing can see you anyway because it's dark. And then anophthalmic means that they lack eyes, which is also very common in very highly adapted cave species. Then goes on to say, these insectivorous bats hunt via elevated echolocation ability to the point where their eyes do not develop, and that they can track and kill small vertebrates such as hummingbirds, though such prey are often discarded. Which I assume is probably some kind of reference to Pokemon battling, in that if a Zubat defeats something, it doesn't eat it. Here, in this, if you were to look at this, you might think, okay, this is a neat scientific figure, but several times in it, they reference Pokéris right there, as well as in this, I would assume that this is some kind of cladogram based on like fake DNA or RNA sequences of these viruses, where it looks like this is sort of the virus that they found in Zubat, whereas Pokéris is not closely related. Or here is the coronavirus itself, somewhat related to these other Zubat viruses, these ZBT-CoV viruses, and then Pokéris is over here. Yeah, I'm also continuing to notice things in this paper that I didn't notice before, which I really enjoy. For example, in these fake DNA sequences, or RNA because it's a virus, it could be either, right here, it says, peer review could catch this, but AJB SR, which I'm guessing is the abbreviation for this journal. It's very common to abbreviate journals if they have many words in their name. Okay, so I'm guessing I submitted this to a couple different journals, because there's very similar ones below it, where it says, especially this one here, where it says peer review couldn't catch this, but OMICS, which I'm guessing is the abbreviation for another journal. And let's see. And then it goes down to say here, the OMICS group journals are real predators. Or real predator, and then they don't get to finish. So I think that's just very funny, personally. I mean, it's not funny in that this is horrible for science, and that these journals are making a lot of money from institutions that could be spending their money on other things. So in the final paragraph of this paper, basically says, while interesting, this does not confirm that Zubat was the source of the COVID-19 outbreak in Silage City, as the bats could have been infected from humans passing through pedestrian-friendly caves. So basically, this strain of COVID did not originate in these particular Zubat, but might have been given to those Zubat by human passengers through the cave. Then says, Zubat is widespread from Western Europe to East Asia, but no data on their virology from this region exists. Then goes on to basically say, COVID itself is basically saying we need to study animals more than we do, particularly their virology, and ends off by saying, the Silage City outbreak has been successfully contained, though resident reports stores selling out of Repel, registered trademark, spray after it was stated to keep Zubats away from spelunkers. And then the final thing about this is the references. So as you can probably see throughout a good bit of this paper, you see these numbers in parentheses. So that must be how this journal requires its sources to be set. So you start at source number 1, and then you, every time you cite something, you give it the next number that you have not used yet. So let's just have some fun. Look through some of their sources. I'm not going to go through all of them because this video is already kind of long. But we have Joy, NC, Joy, NS, Joy, NM. Probably just a reference to there being a million Nurse Joys. Signs and symptoms of Pokerus infection. The Lancet, which is a real journal and a top tier medical journal, like probably the most trustworthy medical journal. So they completely make up this paper and reference it anyway, and the journal doesn't think to catch that. Let's see. Arthropods in video games. Also by that M. Shalomi. That is the fourth author on this paper that I'm not familiar with. Jesse J. James J. Prepare for trouble. Coronavirus outbreaks reaches North America. Rocket Science Monthly. So Jesse and James from the anime. Predatory publishing. Questionable peer review. And fraudulent conferences. American Journal of Pharmaceutical Education. That, potentially, I could see that being a real title, because this is a huge problem. And because if there's a link to it here when you scroll over it, I'm guessing that this is a real thing. I'm actually going to take a look at that after I get done. But again, you know, rabies outbreak in Pokemon Daycare Center. This is the first thing that I can see in here that actively says Pokemon. The journal didn't catch it. Again, infectious diseases, top tier journal. Didn't think to check it. Surgery Journal of Unova, Nidoran envenomation and associated viruses. And again, there's hundreds of these. There's one that's, let's see, Pooh, W, which I'm guessing is Winnie the Pooh. Similarities between politicians and fictional bears. Oh no, that's some hate on the Chinese president or prime minister. I don't remember what they have, but Chinese President Xi Jinping, he hates being compared to Winnie the Pooh. Berenstein B, Berenstein Bears. Masks do not prevent the spread of viral particles in Cubchoo sneezes. So, all of this to say, not all science is equal, at all. Even really official sounding places like the American Journal of Biomedical Research, or Biomedical Science and Research, can be super predatory and very suspicious in their science, especially these days, you know, when everyone's trying to find out as much about this as they can, particularly back in the early phases of the pandemic. This was happening a lot where people were publishing things, not specifically this to like meme, but, you know, people publishing things that did not meet good requirements of scientific scrutiny. And so that's part of why there was a lot of misinformation around COVID back toward the beginning of the pandemic. Because people, kind of bad scientists, and I want to be very clear, like they might have their degree, they might be working at a place, but they are bad scientists. Rushed results to get their name out there as, you know, one of the first people to publish on COVID. And they really did a lot of disservice, A, to just the global populace, and B, to science in general, because there's already a really big mistrust of science globally for some reason that I don't understand. But this obviously doesn't help. So I want to give a massive, massive shout out to whoever wrote this article to expose this journal and, expose how awful their peer review either is, or, maybe they were just overtaxed at the beginning of the pandemic. But that's sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt that they probably don't deserve. Anyway, I'm not going to go through the opinion link, but it'll be down there as well. Please check those out, and if you want to look through the sources more, because I'm sure that there are many, many more fun, weird references that I didn't get to talk about. But this also leads me into the topic for the next video. If you've been around the channel for a while, you'll know that one of the first series that I did on the channel was trying to give every Pokemon a scientific name. And, I got most of the way through Generation 2. I had about one video left in Generation 2, got all the way through Generation 1. And then just kind of lost track of it. I didn't stop uploading around that time, but I moved on to different projects that I wanted to do more. I got a little tired of it. But reading through this made me really want to get back into it. So later this week, we will be resuming that series. And I will be picking up where I left off. So if you have not seen that series before, it is a playlist on the channel. There'll be a link to it up in the cards, and it'll be the fourth link in the description. So please check those out, because I'll be picking up where I left off, like I said, in sort of basically the end of Generation 2. So make sure to go back and watch. Plus, especially toward the beginning, you can see me what I look like when I still had hair. Anyway, I'll be picking up with that toward the end of the week. I'll give you, a couple days to watch those handful of videos. I think there's, maybe 6 or 7 of them. They're not all that long, so please give those a watch, and then keep an eye out for that continuing to give every Pokemon a scientific name later this week. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Pallet_U to keep up on all things Pokemon science. I'm surprised I haven't tweeted about this at all yet, but I haven't. Also, if you feel like our content is worthy of supporting in this way, you can become a supporter on Patreon. The link will be in the description as well. As always, a massive, massive shout out to our supporter over on Patreon, Patty Murphy. Thank you so much. You're the best. And lastly, thank you so much for watching. And as always, there's a time and place for everything.